Hey everybody, Scott Stevens here with a look at some weather across the states. Mostly, there's some other things happening around the world, but as we're in this transition season as well, and there's just not a lot going on. The tropics have kind of taken a little bit of a hit. We've only got 1 week event out in the Eastern Pacific. The Atlantic is all quiet, and that's okay. We're seeing some indications that that may wake up a little bit later on in the month as we get a Central American gyrate going, and that tends to accentuate what development might show up. But otherwise, it's just a change of seasons. And there's a secondary season that's happening as well. This one being that one associated with the sun. And it is the sun that is going through a change from a very active period to a somewhat less active period. The reason I bring that up is because as we see these solar minimum periods take hold, that impacts Earth and Venus and Mars and the whole solar system. But what it does is it relaxes the magnetic field of Earth. And as we get a coronal hole, a lot of solar energy comes, and these waves, these storms, then impact the magnetic field of Earth, and then oxygen and nitrogen are the reds and the greens that show up in this particular event. But this largely in Canada, this is actually the Big Dipper right there. Just pick that out right through there. There's the Big Dipper, and so the North Star up in this direction. So looking off to the north in this particular instance, I think this was Europe. An absolutely breathtaking aurora tonight, still dancing now 7 hours after it started. U.S. and Canada, now your turn. I've seen it and I enjoy it every single time. Noah, here we go. Says there's a chance of a G2, which is just kind of a general size storm, versus an X class or an A class. So G is just kind of in the middle. Geomagnetic storm today, September 29, as Earth passes through a stream of high speed solar wind. The gaseous material is flowing into a northern hole from the sun's atmosphere. Auroras could be sighted, Montana, Michigan. That would be nice. This I thought was just bloody cool. And we see it's not a jetpack; it's just a propulsion by ducted fans, and then allowing a personal rescue kind of situation where you need to have guys that are boots on the ground. But in this case, you can have boots above the ground so that they can hover and search and recovery. We had a fellow die here in the mountains that are just essentially in my backyard, and if we had these kind of devices, it would be much easier for a search and rescue to go in and do recovery, or at the very minimum surveillance out over these kind of rough terrain situations where otherwise everyone's just on foot. So it really kind of cool technology right there. I just found that fascinating from a guy who's always wanted to fly. All right, a live look at the showers and thunderstorms associated with the cool front over the Appalachians lead to some heavy rain and potentially flash flooding concerns along the I-95 corridor tonight. We'll look at this a little bit closer, but it has been so very dry in New England, and that just is kind of fascinating. And August complex north zone has forced some of our crew to pull back and account for everyone and then safely re-engage. We got photos of information. Basically, just it is rough. It's still rough in California, and the longer term rate models just are not doing anything in that regard. There just is nothing coming. So sign me up. I'm with you, Robin. Let me go fly. Probably need to have some good upper body strength to be able to vector correctly and then just swoop and fly. But it's better than those guys that are just diving with like body bat suits, and there's only one way to go. It's kind of nice to have the option to be able to vector that thrust in a direction that would keep you from impacting the ground very strongly. All right, we know you're loving these fall color videos. We'll keep spotting them. So here's another gorgeous one, and this is Vermont, and that's the beautiful thing. Vermont, New Hampshire, Maine, and then continuing to progress southward. New England's got a bit of a cool spell coming up. And then BBC weather, the Northern Lights, and a lunar rainbow captured together in Scotland last night as the moon approaches its full phase. All right, back to the fires. One new fire, one contained. Total burned this year, not quite 7.5 million. The drought in place out west, and it is this part of New England that today is about to get some relief from this slowly advancing cool front. That cool air having pretty much plunged all the way through the central U.S. It is now working off the east. This is the total precip forecast over the next 16 days, and it is New England, the very dry location that will see the bulk of the precip over the next 2 weeks. Middle to western part of the nation, outside of the coastal ranges, There's just not a lot happening. It just isn't there. Even record heat today across the far western states underneath this monster ridge of high pressure that just is not about to let up. 108 in Palm Springs yesterday, 11 degrees, 4 miles northwest of Grand Lake, Colorado. And there's the tropics on the quiet side, Eastern Pacific. We have we have Marie, tropical storm Marie, with winds just barely, maximum sustained at 40, so it's just barely an event. And when the water vapor imagery, there's just this gargantuan ridge in place in the west, and it just does not want to let go. So that means a lot of clear skies, a lot of warm temperatures just in place there. And you can see the smoke into California just kind of hanging in there. We'll get a little bit closer in on that. You can see those active fires just continuing to burn. And there's not a whole lot of help coming from Mother Nature. There just is not. And the heat goes on through the valleys. At least the 90s have been restricted to the desert Southwest, California, and then into Oregon. Elsewhere, approaching some 80s, but nothing too terribly obnoxious. And then warm out ahead of the front. But elsewhere, we are decidedly into the latter part of fall with another cool front coming out of Canada. I could probably refresh this. This is a bit old. Of course, we're not too far past the top of the hour, so the Canadian observations have not arrived just yet. But the north winds all the way across the northern plains states, through the Great Lakes states. Then it turns to southwesterly ahead of this next plunge of cooler air. And as far as humidity, look how deep this cold front pushed all the way through the Gulf Coast. So low 40s, actually 48 degrees at McAllen, Brownsville, Texas, even 33, 39, 22. So breath of fresh air all the way through the entire state of Texas and nearly the entire Gulf Coast, with the exception of the west coast of Florida, on the comfortable side, as fall is absolutely in place. And the arrival of that cool air is locked up behind this front, just kind of hanging there. It is slowly advancing off to the east, even the southern portions, moving a little quicker, but just giving those locations just a nice, good soaking. But it's this ridge, this bloody ridge, just does not want to let go. We had some indications yesterday. Actually, it was the 6Z this morning's midnight run that just broke it down a little bit and tried to bring in a little bit of a westerly flow, kind of like this. We'll see if that happens. If we can develop a deep trough into here, then we would absolutely bring in some moisture. And it's cool enough that New England, you guys, you're going to have a little taste of snow, even down in some of the lower valleys in about a week to 10 days time. That looks like it's going to be an event, and potentially through the west once we get past about the 12th of October. And that would be about the best news we could have. A nice strong onshore flow, bring up those humidity levels, and then the introduction of, at a minimum, some light rain, and that would improve the air quality substantially. And month to date average temperature anomaly, you can see the west has been the warmest, and then even the east, it's patchy, but very, very close to normal, and then very cool through the middle part of Canada. And then the coolest weather on the continent outside of Greenland, where it's obviously upwards of, you can see down here at the bottom, 15.25 degrees cooler than normal, allowing for a nice rebuilding of the snowpack. But otherwise, it's the central part of Texas, which has been the coolest. And the new model run for precip, let's look at snowfall, see what we can bring in. Not much until we get to the Mountain West, and we haven't had the whole run come in yet, so maybe we'll add to that. So, I mean, the news is literally, we're just waiting. We're just waiting for this ridge to break down, and I hate to say it, that's a minimum 10 days away, but probably more likely 14, 15, 16 days away. Maybe a little sooner, but we'll see. We just tend not to bet money on these kind of things until we get some consistency. And once the models bring that closer than about 240 hours or 10 days, then we can kind of say, okay, this is a possibility, but we're not there yet. We're just not there just yet. All right, that's it for the night. I'll see you tomorrow at 5 o'clock, where we'll take a look at this. And then we'll see what we talk about it on another perspective. I've got two topics I'm kind of bantering around. We'll see whether it's going to be MJ12 or MK Ultra. Probably one of the others, one of those, and one of those programs that needs an abbreviation before we talk about it. All right, we'll see you tomorrow. Have a great night, everybody. Thanks, Robin, for popping on in here. I know you've got a lot to do. See you tomorrow.